And I just want to welcome you all. I'm sure some of you are new. This is a discussion. It's not a webinar or anything like that. It's a chance for us to talk about accessibility and hopefully create some change in the industry. So I'm here to listen, and thank you all for coming. And I'm going to turn it over to Wendy to get things going.
And Carolyn, I want to say thank you. You are with JourneyWoman, you are bringing some of these issues to the forefront, and people are starting to listen. So that's great news. And I'll keep it up, right? So, now last month when we talked, we were talking predominantly about airline travel and a little bit about hotels. But one of the things that came up several times in our discussions last time was tour guides and tours, and how to navigate tours, and ideas and thoughts about what we would want to see in the industry from a tour perspective. So let's start. We want to open up to discussion. Anybody's been on any interesting tours that have done well with accessibility, or some things you would like to see in terms of accessibility on tours?
I'm not taking notes, am I?
Would you mind, Brenda?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you're good at it.
You're very good note taker.
You know, I can't say I've ever been on a tour because I usually go on my own, but I can't say I've ever run into any accessibility issues when I've been with another group of women. So I can't really address that in that way. I mean, I can tell you that on my last trip when I was going away at Christmas, I did order gate-to-gate assistance, which was not very well handled by Air Canada. So to me, that was a total waste of time to do it. Short staffed, you know, there was a buggy waiting, but it was only going in one direction. It wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to go. It was going to baggage, and that was it. And that's not where I was going. Yeah. So it didn't, you know, that trying to test the accessibility and that on that time did not work. I stood in line for nearly 5 hours with a cane. Waiting, you know, just to talk to somebody to find out where my suitcase was, because I knew I wasn't going to get to where I was going. So I just decided to go home, and it just, you know, accessibility there did not work. There was a lot of people, there was no buggies, there was nobody to talk to, suitcases piled everywhere. So I was very sorry for a lot of people. I was okay. I just said, okay, one step forward, and, you know, think about you're going to be home soon. I was 20 minutes away from home. People were, you know, from all over the world. And I felt so sorry that they were going to either sleep at the airport because there didn't seem to be any rooms available, you know, during that snowstorm period. But so I just wanted to put that in there. I don't want to go because you talked about airports, but it certainly didn't work at Vancouver Airport. It was a total nightmare. They actually closed the whole airport down the next day and brought the police in. So you know, there was quite a few issues in Vancouver that particular couple of days that I was in that place. But I haven't everything tour guides. Sorry.
Some of what you were talking about reminded me of things when I just turned 65, but when I was in my early and mid 50s, I've had bilateral hip replacements for congenital hip dysplasia. And when I was traveling, before I had my first one, I arrived one time at I always call the end of the bowling alley at the airport, and there was nobody around to help me. And I tell you, I struggled. And I've also been traveling in some places where people with canes or wheelchairs or any visible disability or difficulty, you get a lot of looks and stares in parts of the Middle East. It didn't bother me because I just thought it was either because I was traveling on my own as a woman, or it was because I had the cane. So there's those things, but I've just recently broken my leg in December, and I'm still non-weight bearing. And so my concern is in getting some sort of thoughts around the future and accessibility. I want to hike, and I've gone back to hiking, and I want to get back to it. But most of the trips that I've been on, I don't think accessibility is included, especially depending on where you travel. In the Caribbean, I don't think there's a lot of accessible, like say wheelchair ramps or things for people who need some accessibility.
Mhm. You know, I did see just recently, probably online somewhere, that Florida, there was one of the beaches in Florida was putting down wheelchair accessible mats down to the shore,
Yeah.
which I thought that was really great. But
And that's true in
that's,
England too.
Mhm.
They have those in England that you can get onto and we do in Canada too. We have in my city where I live.
What do you have now?
The beaches all have the access to be
Oh,
able to wheel a chair onto the sand.
Yeah.
And,
And
no
on the
no such thing down here in Mexico. No.
well,
But I have a friend, by the way, in Veracruz, Mexico, whose husband is disabled from having polio as a child. He's Mexican, and she is also working on accessibility, which is, just herself in another separate way. She's another travel writer, so it's interesting.
Well, on Vancouver Island, we've made trails accessible. There's room for wheelchairs everywhere. So I was very encouraged when I heard that a month or so ago. So it's quite accessible on Vancouver Island if anybody feels like traveling here. And we even have the Northern Lights now. So there you go. Get over.
Really?
Yeah, this week has been absolutely brilliant all around the island and, parts of the mainland. We've had absolutely brilliant, spectacular Northern Lights. I mean, it's usually at night, dark. I'm usually in my pajamas, so I don't really want to go out at night and watch for them, but I've seen them elsewhere. But it's wonderful to know that they're right on the doorstep if I do feel like getting dressed and, going out to find them.
Well, Joy, I spent the whole night. This is Jordana again. I spent the whole night in Montana lying outside some years ago looking for the Northern Lights, and I have never seen them despite the fact that I've been fairly far north, and I've never seen them near Vancouver. So
no, well,
I mean, even Vancouver had them. Vancouver had them. Imagine that, yeah. I mean, but to get them in Parksville, all I got to do is walk down 10 minutes, and I can see them. They were absolutely brilliant.
They were Stonehenge too. There's a chunk of sun, a lot of activity on the sun, and it's causing these very distressing. Actually, it's very scary. It shouldn't be happening. There's a lot of stuff going on in the solar system, and that's causing these unusual.
And it's very, very unusual to see them around here. Yeah.
It went down as far as I think somewhere in the States. So I don't know how far down, but it went a long way.
Yeah.
I was going to say one of the things that I don't know if this has come up before, but Canada, and particularly Canada, but the US too, but maybe not quite as much as Canada, but someone can correct me. We have a lot of very protective laws too. I was on a committee with Air Canada one time for accessibility, and Canada, I'm very proud how much they do to make it accessible. It's never perfect, but we're really quite far ahead of other countries. I was in Spain. I remember being abandoned at getting off the plane. There was no help available, even though I'd pre-ordered it. There are a lot of more challenges in different countries and I think the most important thing is to plan ahead and to find out everything. Like at the airport where you were saying there was no help. I don't know what you did, and I'm sure that was crazy. I was traveling at Christmas too. It was nuts, but and a lot of things went wrong.
Everything went wrong.
Yes, exactly. But it was Murphy. Murphy came with me all the way, and everybody else, I think. But bottom line is, it's a pain in the neck, but you have to do an awful lot of planning and preparation and calling. Even at Heathrow Airport, I had to call. I had to give the number of the car I was arriving in. You have to make all kinds of special arrangements if you need special help. But it is there. It was smooth as a whistle, even at Christmas in Heathrow. But it was absolute chaos in Toronto, and by the sounds of other passengers, including you.
Toronto and Vancouver.
Joy, you bring up a good point in terms of planning and and doing a lot of work up front. And that's one of the things, unfortunately, we have to do. And I think using that, and I'll also tie off of what Maureen was speaking of earlier in terms of hiking. One of the things I have thought about is, I keep reading things about the Camino, and I think, oh, I would love to do the Camino, but I know I can't do that. I mean, that's too strenuous for me. So I looked at some of the walks in England.
Oh, yes, beautiful.
And
Do
and
those.
there are, and I have some walking trail books that are, I think I could probably do okay walking 5K, but and then resting, but I can't do 10K in a day. So, or 10 miles in a day. So I'm thinking some of these walking groups or walking tours, if they could break it up into and give us some ideas in much smaller segments for those of us who would like to try, but maybe don't feel quite enough to take on the larger distances.
Yeah, I've
Wendy,
walked
you can
with
tell me
HF
about
Holidays I'm sorry, is somebody else talking or am I talking
No,
over
just-
somebody?
No, I'm trying to respond to Wendy. I was going to say, just look again at
Yeah.
El Camino if it's an absolute dream of yours, because I have had 3 friends now that have done it. I haven't had the courage, but one of them had, she's now passed away, but she had cancer, and the friend she went with had great difficulties walking, and there are little jogs, and they have different means. You don't have to walk it all, and if that's your priority, then that is a challenge. But you can go on different modes of transport between the points and just do a little bit at a time. I don't know if that helps.
Mm. It's wonderful because when I walked through the Cotswolds, Wendy, and I walked with HF Holidays, which is UK based. And I really liked the fact that they had different levels of walks. And you could walk as far as you wanted. You could walk short distances or long distances. If you were, I was kind of a race walker at that time. So I walked with, the group and kind of was ahead of the crowd, but you could really pick the walks that you want. And, I mean, there's so many good walking companies out there, but I like HF. I still want to do the coast to coast, and I probably never will because it probably is beyond me, but it's still up there waiting, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'd love to do it. But I think, even something like that, I could do a little bit of it and, make my way to the next, the next 20 kilometers or whatever and wait for the group and do a bit. I think I could do it that way. So I wouldn't give up hope for doing what you want to do, because there's always a way to do it.
Yeah, and like I said, for the Cotswolds walks, for example, it was broken up into, you could go from town to town to town, and they were 3 to 5 kilometers apart, and so it seemed very doable.
Yes, very doable. Yes. And I think that's what I have to find out as a doable way to do the sea to sea, because that's what I want to do. It's one of my dreams to do before I die. And I don't know.
What do you want to do now? What is sea to sea?
Oh, coast to coast in England, from one coast to another.
Oh, okay.
Through the middle part of England. Yeah, I think it's about 200 miles, something like that. But
well, I'm a walker, and my main problem sometimes traveling is the dang airport walks,
Well, there's that too.
Before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and there's no way to even get there. You've got to take a train or one of those buses or something. And I'm thinking of having a flight with a connection that's 53 minutes. I'm like, I wonder if I can do it. I worry about the tight connections and making sure you can get from one part of the airport to the other. And I walk just fine. So that's probably everybody's problem. My disability is arm and carrying stuff.
Yeah, but then you've got to worry about whether the flight's going to be on time. And then, you get to the other end. If the flight's half an hour late, you're going to be having butterflies in your tummy and wondering whether you're going to make it where you're getting to. So,
Carolyn just posted.
I was just going to say, we did a few articles last year, the year before, about a walking bike called an A-Linker. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Wendy, that could be an option too. The woman that started that company is actually here in Canada. I met her a few years ago, and then she introduced me to all these women that are using this bike, and which is quite rugged actually. So it folds, and you can take it on planes, and you can do outdoor activities and walks with this A-Linker bike. And I had a feature with a woman who did all of Norway and Scandinavia. She has a lot of people with MS are using it now. Like oh, what's her name? The actress.
Oh, yeah.
It'll come to me in a minute, but anyways,
Christina Applegate? Christina
No.
Applegate?
No, she was in Legally Blonde.
Oh, what's her name? No,
Selma
Selma Hayek.
No.
Selma.
Anyways,
Carolyn, what's it called, that device? What's it called?
it's
again?
called an A-linker.
Yeah.
A-Link.
A-Link.
Because the woman that started it, her last name is A-Link. So it's like you sit and you're at eye level on the bike, and it's got these big tires and everything. And
It's really
you-
simple, it's not fun, actually. I think, can you go?
yeah,
Can you get
Mhm.
speed?
they're very fashionable, I think. I mean, that's what I would want instead of a walker or something. You get on these bikes and they're
Mhm.
super cool. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is
You
it
could have goggles and a
L-I-N-K-E-R?
helmet and nip around everywhere, couldn't you?
yeah.
Joy, you had a question?
Is it L-I-N-K-E-R?
That's
A
right.
is- Yeah, A-linker.
Thank you.
I kind of have a different accessibility issue.
Mhm.
That is my hearing.
Mm.
And I have really good hearing aids, and supposedly, and I've tried it out. If someone speaks in a language into my phone, it'll translate it into my hearing aids. But my problem is with a couple of things. One is just being able to follow along quickly enough and process what I'm hearing. And the other one, of course, is background noise, right? There's background noise that I'm not able to really understand what people are saying. It's not so much the hearing in that instance, but it's the understanding. But I don't know if anyone has dealt with a hearing disability.
Beth, I haven't, but I'm wondering, from a travel perspective, what are some of the things that would help in terms of being hearing impaired from a traveling perspective?
That's a very good question. And I'm going to kind of fall back on, I also cannot eat gluten, right? But I can get cards in different languages, right? That I can hand to wait staff and restaurant managers and that kind of thing. So I think maybe something like that would help, right? That I could, maybe a card that if I'm looking for a particular thing, or I can also, with my hearing aids, I can speak English into my phone and it will translate it written into the other person's language. And then I can just show them the phone, right? And they can read it. But these are all technologies. Because of COVID, I haven't been anywhere outside the US for quite a while. So I'm going to Europe in May, and I'll be in, probably the place where I will need it most is in Croatia.
I imagine too that the background noise in the airports and in restaurants make a big difference too. And even if you can switch your hearing aids to only hearing in front, you still get a lot of that surround in terms of hearing announcements and things like that. That must be a challenge.
Yeah, and I do have that. I have a crowd setting on my hearing aids that work in.
That's interesting.
I would think also even in an airport, for me, sometimes when they're announcing things over the loudspeaker, to me, it sounded,
Mhm.
and you can't,
Me
I
Me
can't tell what it
too.
is, and I have great hearing. So I'm wondering if one of the things that it would be nice if airports would, where we check in, if they had, where they would actually post announcements
Yeah,
so that we could read them as well
yeah.
as,
Subtitled,
yep.
Yeah.
yep,
Mhm.
subtitled announcements in
Yes.
the airport. That's for
Closed
sure.
Well,
captioning.
this reminds me, I have a very good friend here. She's 79 years old. She is almost completely blind from macular degeneration, and she has hearing aids. I must go, next time I'm down at the beach, I'm going to sit and have this whole conversation with her. And she travels back to Sweden from here in Mexico and back. She lives here, but she has gone back and forth over the years, and she does this. And I have traveled with her myself down to Guatemala and back, and she's amazing. So she somehow figures it out, and it's good. It's good for her to go have someone to go with. So
Mhm.
that's why I went with her. But yes, she travels by herself to Europe and back to Mexico, though. So I'll find out what she thinks would be good. I'll get that information
Mhm.
too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can you tell me who was speaking? I couldn't,
Oh,
I
that was
couldn't-
Jordana. My
Jordana.
video's off, so.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So
Other thoughts, what are some other types of, we were talking last time about, I think several people talked about being on ships or on riverboat cruises and then
Yeah.
taking the excursions
Mm.
from there.
That was difficult when I was on a river cruise. I wasn't in any way incapacitated, but the people who were had to go up to the top deck, over to the next ship, and because they're side by side when they at the rivers. So I just wondered how that worked for people with mobility issues.
again, that's something that
If
they
I've had a
warn you
wheelchair, I don't know
about.
how they do it. Pardon, sorry, Joy.
That's something that they warn you about. I've looked, you have
Yeah.
to read between the lines because a lot of I
Yeah.
was looking at a very interesting trip, and then I suddenly saw that this trip requires the ability to walk on uneven things, and for this long a day,
Yeah.
and for this
Yeah.
time frame. And I
Yeah.
thought that is also on the river cruise things. Some of them, most of them, hitch up to each other, and it's something to discuss with the travel agent or the tour company as to how they handle
Yeah.
it before you go.
Yeah. I'm not.
Because
I'm
they
not
do
aware
have
how they handled
ways.
it.
Yeah.
I had a bad experience. I don't know if anyone has caught the ferry from Wales to Ireland.
Mhm.
And I made all the preparations ahead of time. I actually, the ferry was canceled. So I was there and I talked to someone, and I do have some mobility issues, but my largest concern most of the time is with luggage because of the arthritis in my shoulders and arms and hands. And they had told me they would help me. And I went through the whole process the next day. There was nobody there to help me. And I kept asking, and they kept saying, when you get to the ferry, we'll help you. So I got on a bus, had to roll my luggage on, but it wasn't too bad. Got to the ferry where all the I don't know if any of you all have caught it, but it's a huge ferry boat. And we got there, and suddenly everybody starts running up metal steps to the top deck with their luggage. And I'm stuck there with all the cars in the belly of the ferry with nobody, no person,
Wow.
nothing. And so I slowly had to go up probably about 3 levels with 2 suitcases. And then when I was up there, I did find out on the other end of the boat, there was an elevator that I could have taken, but nobody told me about it. So I do think even when you try and prepare in advance, sometimes they don't necessarily help you, especially if you're not in a wheelchair or you're not using a cane, and you maybe don't, I have gray hair, trust me, but it's dyed. I sometimes think I should let it go gray so I can get the help I need. But that was my experience with a ferry.
I have a funny story
Well,
about that invisible disability, because one time I was supposed to be pre-boarded, and I was sitting in the wheelchair close to the reception desk at the gate, and they called the pre-boarding, and they wheeled me in, and then they called the next group and the next group, and I'm thinking something's wrong here. Finally, I caught the attention of the flight attendant, and I said, shouldn't I have been pre-boarded? And she said, "Oh, I thought you were just sitting in the chair."
Oh, really? Oh, really? Come
well,
on.
I had
Well,
an
the-
issue with
well-
Air Canada after that, and that's when I got onto the committee for invisible and accessible.
Well, and-
Invisible.
Mhm.
I've got
I,
one.
I,
Go
Oh, I was
ahead.
gonna say, I had
Yeah,
two comments.
Lori?
One, I was gonna say for that, oh, by the way, you said introduce yourself, Lori Anderson. I live in the United States. Part of that is, so I'll just make a comment on that one, but the other part of that is that it's like, okay, first class. All right, anybody who needs help. All right, can you board on the next one? I mean, they don't even give you time if you
Yeah.
need help to get
Mhm.
there, to get
Yeah.
on. So I've had that problem before. But anyway, but I was gonna say the thing that I see the most too is I do have cane. Because I have terrible arthritis. I have no cartilage and terrible arthritis in my hips and knees, but I'm not, there's not, they expect you to still be more able if you're not in a wheelchair. There doesn't seem to be anything between
Right.
I can get around really well by myself
Yeah.
or I'm in a wheelchair.
Yep.
There's no, anything in between there. I need some help. I could use a bench somewhere along the
Yep.
way.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really do these steps or it's going to take me a long time to get up them or down them, even worse. I think that there's there's no recognition of it's a continuum,
Yep.
from really able to do everything to not able to do anything. And, we all fall along that continuum, but you don't really get help until this end. And the other thing you're talking about, whether it's tours or whether it's airplanes or whether it's not what it is. Once I finally get to the gate or get to the help or get to wherever it is, they're helping you. But like she was talking about getting to the ferry even, I mean, there's all of the prep before you get there.
Mhm.
If you've got to take a train, if you have to, even get out of your car with your luggage, if you've got to, there's nothing, my example is I was in O'Hare Airport and I took the train from downtown. Well, it's a long walk from where the train gets off till you actually check in.
Mhm.
And there is nothing in
In
that
between.
huge stretch.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I think that's true of a lot of major airports. There's nothing, from here to there to help you out. And of course, there's no like benches or anything for those of us who are slower. And so I think that there's they're not adjusting for the whole continuum of help that might need to be there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Good
That's a
point.
very good point. That's
Yeah.
a very good point, Laurie. Yeah, because I don't look disabled, but I also have arthritis, and from an accident, I have issues with my bones and my back and my arm. And so I get wheelchairs and wheel my stuff in it. I try to do that sometimes. They have no
Mhm.
idea. They want me to sit in it and put my bags on me. I'm like, no, I can walk. I just need a way to move my stuff
Yep.
easily. And sometimes there are airports that have those kind of things, and other times they're certainly not. And there's no continuum. It's either you totally need a wheelchair or you're completely fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
One
and
of
I
the
think,
challenges,
Go ahead.
too that I've had at airports is going through security. And because I've had hip replacements, I always have to go through and be scanned or have a
Mhm.
total body check. And some airports have the machine and some don't, or it's not working. And I had an experience where I was going through, it's fine if I'm traveling with somebody and I'll say somebody in front of me and somebody behind, so that when I'm pulled to the side, they can watch my luggage. But I was on my own one time going through and I was watching my laptop and other things and getting a bit antsy. And the fellow said, "Don't worry about it. We got lots of cameras. If it's taken, they'll find it." And I thought, oh my God, that's not the point. We don't want stuff taken. But it's being pulled aside in and out of security and watching your luggage and the pace that they push you through.
Mhm.
So it's a challenge.
I almost wish they had a pass that said I was disabled, like you have car stickers or license plates, because I've been disabled to a certain degree since I was 13. And I remember traveling. I traveled for business for years, being 30 years old and not being able to get help with luggage because I didn't look disabled.
Mhm.
My worst experience, and I think, was it you, Joy, who said maybe you were on the disability advisory for one of the airlines? I know someone with
Yes.
Delta
Yeah.
who sits on the advisory committee. And the way I got to know him was because this was probably only about 6-7 years ago. I too will get a wheelchair because I can walk, but I can't walk long distances, and I cannot use a cane because of the arthritis in my hands and my elbows. So you'll never see me using a cane, but I got to check in and they asked me if I could get out of the wheelchair to go through the x-ray, whatever
Yep.
you stand in. And I said, yes, I can. And I had my shoes off. So it's hard to stand with my shoes off. I got in there and we got held up. And they told me I was going to have to stand there. And I kept asking them, can I go sit down? And they're like, no, you have to stand here. We're trying to get somebody, we've got to check like 3-4 people ahead of you. There's a hold up. We have to scan them. They detected something. And I'm like, I can't stand. They're like, no, you can't go sit down in your wheelchair. It got worse. A person came up to me and you have to lift your arms, and I cannot lift my arms all the way. My one elbow is permanently dislodged. I had somebody jump in and start trying to straighten my arm for me.
Oh,
Oh
no.
my
They
God.
thought I was just being obstinate. So that's why I say, I almost wish I could have a tag that
Yep.
somebody has seen ahead of time, that I'm not faking, I'm not making it up.
Mhm,
If you have a disability, please help me. So
mhm.
that's just a comment.
Oh, I was going to say, but I do know people who've had cards. Sometimes TSA isn't, or wherever you are, isn't au fait, isn't together about what can exist. I went through a security with a friend who was on a insulin pump. So it's a medical device attached to his body. They wanted him to take it off.
Yeah,
Really?
I had my back brace with steel stays in the middle of a Spanish airport security, and he pulled up my sweater and was telling me I had to take it off in public.
Mhm.
And I was absolutely mortified. The friend I was with is a legal specialist, and she was absolutely infuriated, and she attacked them verbally because, I mean, not just assertively, but she said there's no way. And she said she needs a private place to go or you don't do it. And I think I've learned to be very assertive because, like you were saying, Cynthia, if you've got to sit, you've got to sit. If they say you can't, you say, okay, I'll have to just sit on the floor then. And you start going down. They will find a seat for you. And and I have some good news, which I just discovered this Christmas. Going through Toronto to Britain, I had to take off my little boots, and I had forgotten, because it's been a while I've been not traveling in COVID, that if you have anything metal in your shoes, you have to take them off. And I had zips on them, so they had to come off, and I can't bend and get access, and I couldn't negotiate my boots, and it was a real challenge. And I'm afraid I became obstinate because I said, I can't get them off, so somebody will have to help me. So one of the security guys actually had to unzip them. They don't like that, so they help you more to get you out of the way. And I found out on the way back, I was still wearing these little boots, the only boots I had. And in Heathrow, I started to struggle with them, and they said, oh, don't worry about that. You don't need to take your shoes off. You also didn't have to have your liquids changed. They've got all this high-tech stuff there. You didn't have to show your liquid bag. I had forgotten to drink my water. I can't believe I did, but my water bottle was half full. They took it out. I said, oh, sorry, forgot it. And he said, don't worry, I've just got to check it. He swiped it and gave it back to me to drink. He didn't have to go through all that. So the good news is it's getting easier with all those things.
Mm.
They won't need to take off the bag off your body or my brace off my body. The technology can see through your suitcase, through you, through everything, and you just go. But tell them if you can't raise your arm, you physically say I can't raise them, and you don't let somebody push them. I would
Oh, I'm,
kick them.
trust me, I'm very vocal. The next time I flew, I actually arranged for somebody to meet me almost at my car to walk me through the airport.
Yeah, Brenda,
Hey,
I think you-
I've had to show them that my arm doesn't bend up because my bones are permanently in a surgery fusion position, and I am not just, being obstinate or something. But I don't think that we should have to do anything like that.
No,
Yeah.
we should not.
All of us
and-
are traveling anyway, by the way. Yay.
And in all frankness, I think the person who did that to me, it was so busy and they were so rushed. So it wasn't that I had angst necessarily towards the employees, because oftentimes they're frustrated and overworked and everything. So I don't think they're trained to hear. And especially, again, I say that because my mother's almost 90, she's turning 90, and she'll get a lot of attention. travel where I don't get any. So I think sometimes it can be a little ageism in reverse too, especially when you're younger. Something.
Brenda, I think you had a point, Brenda, earlier.
Yeah, last week, we talked about, or the last meeting, we talked about educating the airport personnel. And this seems to be something that would address everything.
Yep.
And the bit about having a card, if on the tickets, there was a place where there was notification that there was an accessibility issue, and then they could have a questionnaire for what is it that we need to do to help you. And they could be educating their personnel and having places for people to go. I think that we were talking about having some kind of I can't remember what the name of it would be, but a place that people could go and find out exactly who they needed to see in order to be brought to all the right places. So it seems like an education that's needed in the airports, and kind of a system with tickets. And with that, Bob's your uncle, if they are able to address it worldwide.
Yeah. You know, it's an interesting point, because I know I flew Delta coming up here to Buffalo, and I don't normally fly Delta, but I just happened to be the route I took. And I did have a wheelchair. And when I got to the plane, and the attendant came and took my luggage from my hands and put it up for me. Didn't say, "Can I help you?" They just automatically came, took my luggage, put it up for me. Once I sat down, they knelt down next to me and said, what can we do on this trip to make it more comfortable for you? If there's something you need. I mean, I was so impressed with the flight attendants and how they, and again, I'm going to see when I go back to tomorrow, because I had a similar experience on each of the legs of the flight. And I'm wondering if when I go back tomorrow, if I'll have it, if that's maybe something that Delta is, you know. Now, of course, it was clear because I came with the wheelchair, but the way they treated me was just, I was very, very impressed with them.
Yeah.
And I think it's the education of the employees.
Yeah. And Heathrow seems to have a good reputation. A lot of people last meeting mentioned Heathrow, and it's being mentioned again here.
It is up to the airline to look after their passengers. But when the airline delivers you to the airport baggage area, then it becomes the airport's responsibility. You have to order the help, like pre-plan it and ask for it, and it'll be there. But it should be there. But I'm afraid Toronto, for example, breaks down on that. It's murderous to go through there with a disability. But I was really happy with Heathrow. But I've been to some very challenging ones in other countries in Europe and around South America and so on. It's not. It's inconsistent. And it's anxiety provoking if you don't know, if you haven't done all the research and you don't know what to expect, or even if you have and it doesn't happen.
Even if you have, right? I have done it sometimes and had it still, you know, and like Joy Fox there, I was one time when I had a wheelchair, I was supposed to be boarded and they left me sitting there until everybody else was on. I had that happen before too. So, and it depends on the airline. Some are better than others for sure.
I don't know if anybody else does this, but when I'm using a wheelchair, I will get a lot of $1 bills. I know this isn't very nice, but that way it looks like I've got a wad of money. And I mean, I will tip well, but it may look like it's $50 when it's only 21s or something. But that seems to help too, to get really good service when you're in a wheelchair. Just kind of hold it in your hand rather than a $20 bill that they can't see.
Works really great. Works great in Mexico to give them money. Yeah.
I know in my small airport in Montgomery, Alabama, when they pick you up at the at the plane and they take you to the luggage claim, they stay with you, and then they take you out to your car and load your suitcase in the car for you.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he said to me, and I made a comment about, oh, I have to lug, I lug everything into the airport. And they said, just call us, once you get here, call us and we'll come out to your car and get your luggage for you and take you in. Now, I've
Wow.
never done that, but I always have them take me to the car on the way home. So,
Mm.
but again,
I think,
it's a small little airport, and
yeah,
so it's.
I think there is something to be said
But Jen,
about
you used to be able to
smaller-
walk, you used to be able to
Wait,
walk to
wait,
the
but-
plane on those
Yeah.
little airports.
Beth, you were saying,
I was just gonna say that I think that there is something to be said about smaller airports. I lived in Sacramento and, great airport, great service. And now I've moved to Albuquerque, which is an even smaller airport. But it really is just so easy to get in and out of.
Yeah.
And
I
not,
think-
crowded and of course I got stuck in Sacramento with the whole Southwest Christmas debacle. But yeah, I think that's, to look into that and, it may cost a bit more money, but it's worth it.
Can anybody give some advice on the actual trips that are manageable? Because we've done a lot on the airports, but I really would like to go on a trip that I can do without a hassle and not feel left behind because I have limitations. Any ideas, please?
I took a 1-week bus trip in Ireland, and it was well thought out and excellent. And the bus driver was the guide, and he went out of his way to help me. I don't know if anybody here who has arthritis, but I have to take Humira injections. And I was a little nervous carrying shots to Europe with me. Not so much in big airports, but in smaller airports when you're carrying drugs or something, but you can't just dispose of the needles in a hotel room. And he was very kind. His wife was diabetic and he said, I'll take your needles and take care of them. So to answer your question about tours, I had a very good experience. Now, it helped that it was supposed to be a small bus, but the bus broke down before the tour started. So we had a brand new bus that seated like 40 people and there were maybe 13 of us, so we could spread out. But and it helped having, actually, I'm not one to take tours. I like traveling on my own, and I usually have. That was the first one I ever did because I had a short period of time I wanted to pack a lot into. And I just found having the bus driver, who was also the guide, was very helpful. I just, as soon as he knew my situation, I didn't have to talk to anybody at the hotel. He walked up there, made sure I had help with my luggage. He insisted that I not carry it. So it was a good experience. But again, it was a small group. So I don't know with a larger group what it would have been like.
I also, and this is Barbara,
hi, Barbara.
sorry, excuse me. So I also went to Ireland and the tour group was CIE, which I've forgotten what that stands for, but I needed help. And they had one of the legs of the trip was a lot of walking. And they had prearranged for a wheelchair. And one of the persons on the trip was a nurse, and she pushed me up this hill to see I think it was Newgrange area, to see the sights. So, it depends on the tour guide, the tour group that you're with, and the people that you're with as well. And as far as airports, I have paid people to move me around in a wheelchair. I'm not disabled, but I do have implants and I have a bad left knee that's still, I'm waiting to get replaced. So at the moment, I'm not traveling much. But you can get people to help you, even in airports. And mine was prearranged. So when I got there, I think I had to wait a little bit, but I was early enough, it didn't matter. And the gal came and wheeled me down the halls until I got to my gate, and I gave her some money. So one of my questions was, how much should you tip the people that wheel you around in the airport or anywhere?
It
Any
depends,
idea?
because Air Canada, for instance, the Air Canada employees are not allowed to take tips. That's part of
Oh.
their fee. However, they only take you to a certain point and they cannot take you beyond that. And then you have to get a porter. The porter has a charge that you have to pay, plus they expect a tip.
Mm.
So it costs quite a bit to get the porter that just takes you from literally, in one case, it was just picking me up at the carousel and just getting me out the door to where the car was waiting. But they can't do that, but you have to pay it. So in Miami, for instance, the porter takes you all the way through, and then they don't charge you, but they expect a handsome tips and then pull their hand out if they don't think it's big enough. It can be a bit embarrassing. So it's a challenging idea, but I know, I think in Heathrow, they weren't allowed to take tips, but he had his hand behind, sort of asking for one. So I do it because I'm grateful for the help. So I know it's going to be the cost of the holiday as tips to get help.
Yeah, and
Okay.
for
And then
me,
there's the question of different countries tipping costs,
Yeah.
customs.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
a thing.
Yes.
in the US,
Japan, we-
in the US, I was tipping 5 and 10. Now I'm tipping 10 and 20.
yes.
And it depends
Okay.
on, if it's just going from one gate to another, short, but if they're taking me from one terminal to another terminal, and, then I go with the higher
And
amount.
tipping is not a worldwide
No.
custom. I think you have to do your research. I think it's Japan where it's an insult to tip.
Yes,
Mhm.
There are
yes, it is.
countries
That's
where
right.
you have to, yeah.
That would
Okay.
be good to know, quite frankly.
Yes.
I was
You can look
reading
it
an
up
article
ahead and
about
see-
tipping, and yes, Japan is one of them. There were several countries where it's considered insulting, yeah, and others where they stand there and look at you until you give them a tip, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just need to check that out before you go,
Yep.
because all countries have different rules. So I would certainly investigate that and have a few small bills in my pocket,
Mhm.
Yeah. just in case.
Back to, you
Okay.
were talking about, before we got into the tipping, we were talking about accessibility.
Yeah.
There are some, I want to say tours, or there are places where you can, I'm clicking the wrong button and it doesn't work, who arrange travel for people who have accessibility issues. Condé Nast put out a list of their 6 tour companies that are dedicated to accessibility
Oh,
issues.
That would be nice
See
to
if I can
have.
put that in the website. Let me see if I can-
Yeah.
Hmm.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah, well, okay. There we go.
Hmm.
I keep thinking I'm going to go look at them, but I just moved back and a bunch of crazy things happen. So I haven't gotten that far yet.
Maybe we can Google Condé Nast for that.
but it would be
Here,
interesting,
I'll put
because
it in here.
that's one of the things we'd like to know is, what are the kinds of things that we would like to have from a tour company?
Oh, good.
Somebody that, what would make a tour company more desirable if they appeal to accessibility? What would we like to see a tour company provide or do?
For me, the one thing, because I did do one in Scotland also, but it was just a couple-day one, and it was for me to be able to be in the first seat. So they told everybody else on the bus, because it was hard for me getting on and off, so that I wouldn't have to sit way in the back and I could extend my leg, which it's hard for me to go distances with. And it's probably the same for a lot of you. If you sit a long time, your knees can lock up. And so it's good to have some room. And if you're in the front seat of one of those tours or the bus, it will give you more room. So you don't, like I said, get a locked knee, so to speak.
Mhm.
I
So,
remember going on bus trips with my mom.
who's
And
talking? Sorry. talking.
Brenda's talking right now. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I remember going on bus trips with my mom, and they were really well taken care of, a lot of the people. There were some people who had Alzheimer's, and there were different types of Alzheimer's that they were helping different people on the bus with. And we would, even when it was time to go for lunch and the bus was stopping, there would be people that would be following certain people and making sure that they kept an eye on them while the hour-long break was happening. And it's just, as I'm listening, I'm getting the sense that bus tours seem to be pretty together with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious about cruise ships, not to get off track, but I went to a wedding on a cruise ship and it was a horrible experience. It was just a day thing, but the lines were so long. So I don't know if any of you all have taken cruises, if they got out of their way to help with accessibility or not.
Yeah, I took a cruise with my mom, a 7-day Mexico cruise, and just the size of the ship alone for her, you know, doing all of that walking was really challenging. And I don't remember there being a lot of accommodation for that.
So you asked what you can do, what tour groups can do. So I think the first thing is they need to do sensitivity training of their employees, because a lot of groups don't even consider it unless they're forced to, how to help the disabled or people needing assistance. So I think it starts with that kind of training and awareness. And then from there, maybe they could have one person designated as the person most capable of assisting passengers. And, you know, so that you're aware of who to go to for certain issues.
It's a good idea. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just was looking up something. I was just going to write it in on accessible tourism. So the United Nations have got something out there where I you know, according to the World Health Organization, 15% of the world's population, which is 1 billion people, live with some form of disability. So accessibility for all tourism facilities, I think they're trying to do something about it. I haven't read it all, but it might be something to look into.
Yeah.
And there's others too. Where did it go? I find that BC is very accessible. I've seen things in the Okanagan where they've got special travel guides to who are trained to help with disability issues. So I mean, that's very good from where I'm sitting, but it doesn't help for the rest of the world, does it?
Yeah.
If I go anywhere in BC and I have a problem, well, I know I'm going to be okay, but that doesn't. So if you do a Google search on accessibility and travel, all of these things come up. There's even a group called accessibility travel agents, which means maybe they're just trained to help with any kind of disability. I'm not sure. Cosmos seems to be one of them. Marlin Travel, accessible travel in BC. That's us. Yes, we're doing good. So there's a whole lot of them on here. Travel agents for accessible travel. There's a whole network of them. So maybe it might be worthwhile to look them up and perhaps list them, and you know, have a few of these resources within JourneyWoman so that people who do have issues, and the issue that I had was not dealt with at all. So I would like, even though my travel agent ordered it, it was not dealt with, but I'm not really disabled. I just need a cane from time to time because I've had surgery, you know, and standing in line for, you know, with nowhere to sit for 5 hours doesn't really
work. Yeah.
Joy, have you ever thought about, I've seen some people with like foldable stools that are both a cane and a stool. Is that something that you've ever tried?
I've Years ago, I had one, but it was to go to things where there was no seat. But I don't have one at the moment. No, I don't, but I've seen people with them. They're
Because
just,
that's another thing I'd really love to write about is what are, because there are like products like that might make it easier for you.
yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
you know, the airports are not going to change in a heartbeat.
No, they're not.
Trish, Trish has a comment on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trish,
Hey, Trish.
I'm sorry, my comment was that they most of the time have metal legs and the airports won't let them through. You know, there was someone on here in the last.
me, yeah, I had a foldable stool.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let it on the plane.
Oh, really?
They did it in the US, they did, but when I got to Japan, they wouldn't let it go. And I said, but I needed to sit down. They said, no, you have to check it. Well, checking it didn't do me any good because I needed it so I could sit.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, having
I
to
think
stand up and having to hold on to my luggage and carry my stuff through customs and immigration and all for hours is one of my problems, because I have to just keep putting my stuff down and putting it back, picking it, putting it down and getting it back. And that's why I sometimes get wheelchairs, but then the wheelchairs worry me because sometimes they take longer. If I just walk myself, I can get through the airport faster, and that's worrisome.
I
think
don't
they need to-
understand. They let strollers go through. What's the difference?
They
Like,
do.
I do, yeah.
it's the same thing. It's a metal thing that you can take right to the door of the plane.
I don't know who makes the rules, but I don't think it's anybody with a
Well, you know, this is what we're doing. We're breaking the rules.
Yeah. We need to, because they need to be revised.
They do. That's ridiculous.
And everyone
two quick
who writes about
comments.
travel, all of
I
us
have
here
two
who
quick
write about
comments and then
travel.
I'm going to have to run, ladies. I have to go into a meeting tonight.
Yeah.
But my two comments are, my husband was in a wheelchair too, believe it or not. So I was actually the caregiver. Some of these accessibility tours, you need to double check because they're not for solo travelers.
Yeah.
They're accessible for wheelchairs, but they want you to have a caregiver with you on those trips. And then my last comment,
Great
and
point.
maybe if we have another meeting, and that is, I travel with a CPAP, and I don't know if anybody else here trying to get distilled water in other countries, and I actually found a place online that has bottled water that's for traveling, and it says distilled water. And I was able to get it, believe it or not, in Costa Rica and other places without having any issues because it was sealed and it had a medical seal on it. So that's just a thought, but nice.
What's the
chatting.
site? What's the site before you go?
No, it was before COVID, so it's been a few years,
Oh.
but you probably could go online. There were only one or two places back then that you could buy it. And I did buy some. I bought like 8 bottles and took them with me because I was gone for a long time. But nice
Oh, thank you,
chatting.
Cynthia.
I've
Yeah,
gotta
thank
run.
you.
Bye.
I think one of
Bye,
the other things
Cynthia.
is that a lot of times we think in terms of mobility or those visible disabilities or challenges that people have, but I'm a retired oncology nurse, and I think in terms of people who have had cancer, and there's a lot of hidden challenges that they have, whether it's related to late effects of treatment or ongoing effects. I have a friend who had head and neck cancer 20 years ago. He's now having late effects of the radiation and can no longer, or has great difficulty swallowing and has to have everything in a thin liquid. He's not on a feeding tube yet, but there's all kinds of things like that. Or, oral dryness and the amount of fluids that you may need and the amount of coordination it takes to be able to take some supplements or certain food items. Women possibly that have lymphedema post breast cancer and various effects like that. So that's a whole group of people that in some ways it's a bit hidden because you don't necessarily see the disabilities or challenges that they have. Whereas you can visibly see somebody in a wheelchair or with a cane, things like that.
That's such a great point. I actually had an old friend email me this week and she had lymphedema after breast cancer, and the whole process of she had a compression
Garment, the
sleeve on her arm, and she felt like they made her undress in front of everybody, and like this whole security line thing is
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so.
I had a situation and I forget where it was, but the first thing they took off was my shoes, and they decided to take me, and all my stuff was on the belt, my passport, everything I had was on the belt, going through and away from me. And they wanted to give me a body search. And I said, what? You want to give somebody my age a body? So, and they did it right there where I was standing with no shoes on. And I said, are you allowed to do this? I said, there's got to be some rule against doing this when I'm watching my passport. Go down over there. I want my stuff back. And he said, stand still. I'm going to body search you. And they brought a woman over to do it. And I thanked them for that. I said, thank you for recognizing that woman should be doing this. But it was about 10 minutes while they really felt everywhere all over my butt. I don't know what they were looking for, because I sure as hell wasn't taking a stash of anything with me. But I mean, they wanted to search everything. And I said, you're not going to feel me all over the body, and
I get that. I get that done every single time I go through an airport. The scan machine is not working because I have prosthesis in my hips, so that the metal detector will go off.
Yeah,
and there was one time where I thought if that woman got any closer, I would have been undergoing a breast exam. It's
Well, and
yeah,
and
it's all
you know,
security that you might have something hidden.
well, and the reason I have a TSA pass is because I'm fat, and if I go through the machine where you put your hands over your head, that machine doesn't go through the fat on your body. So they always want to search me in really uncomfortable places. So that's part of the reason that I have a TSA pass. So at least it works in this country. But I mean, I think that those are other things that we don't think about if you're a larger person trying to squeeze yourself in a little teeny seat and people look at you. But anyway, just having to go through security and what does work and doesn't. And, I mean, there's just a lot of other things that go along with that as well.
Yeah.
So much to talk about. What are we going to talk about on our next call?
Who they recruit in security is what I want.
Training.
Yeah, really. Yeah, training. There's so much training needed. If you're going to
I mean,
status quo.
anytime we can come up with kind of our wish list, like we did in the airports article, which I put in the chat, because it's hard for people to visualize change unless we say, here's what we want.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so if we can come up with lists of here's what we would like, I think that will be helpful to help start creating some discussion and at least having the discussion, because I don't even think it's happening right now.
Well, I think the other thing we didn't cover at all in this talk is rail travel.
Yep.
So just taking a
I was
rail,
going to mention that.
standing on it, if you can get to the gate, and then it's like, oh, doors open, oh, done. And you were like, but I didn't have time to get there.
Yeah.
Now I got to put my bag above my head and maybe I can. And you know what I mean? There's a lot that goes in with that too. Right?
There's a lot. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah.
We're trying to do these every
Good
month.
too.
So what's a month from today? I'm sorry, I don't have my phone.
February, April 2nd, sorry. I'm
April
going backwards.
2nd.
Yeah. Is this
Really?
March,
April 2nd?
Yeah. March the 2nd today.
or is this March 3rd? I'm lost in dates.
Yeah.
It's a
So
second.
March 6th would roughly be a month, but also
That would be 3 days. You mean April.
April 6th.
I'm sorry, April. I'm the one who doesn't know what day it is, remember? And then Friday is Good Friday after that. But if April 6th is okay with all of you, we'd love to convene with you again then. And I'll give you a quick little preview of some other things coming up. We have our book club meeting it's 2 weeks, right, Wendy?
Yep, 2 weeks.
On the 15th.
Tangerine is a great book.
Yeah,
I
I'm reading
have
it.
a book club question really quick. I really wanted to go to the last one, but I was in the middle of the book and I've read most of Isabel Allende's novels. And I thought, I haven't finished this one, so I shouldn't be in the book club. But then I saw Carolyn, that you wrote somewhere that it was okay anyway.
And
So
in
I
fact,
wish I had.
it's okay even if you haven't read the book at all.
Yep.
But I have already
feel
read
free to
that.
come.
I've already read that one.
Yeah.
I've just finished that one a couple of weeks ago. So I'm ready for that.
Yeah. And we're getting ready to announce our next 6 books actually. So we're working on that now. And the we had a community call last week. And we're going to have another one on March 23rd. And then I'm in the process of arranging a whole webinar on cybersecurity because I got hacked when I was in Europe, and
Ooh,
I want to share all my learnings with you about
that
what
would be
happened.
good. That would be
Yeah,
a good
so
thing. Yes.
it really is going to be more and more important. If you've seen all the people getting laid off in the tech industry and all the stuff that's happening, the hackers are getting pretty aggressive. And I mean, Joy, you just experienced on Facebook where people take your identity. So, so we're going to be talking about that too, because I think it's going to be really important for travel.